Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and we're getting an update today from Erik Wetterling, also known as the Hedgeless Horseman. And we'll put a link to the hedgelesshorseman.com down below this so you can follow along with Erik's work. And Erik, good to have you on the show again, as always. We were talking off mic about hitting record high gold prices overnight and earlier this morning. Things have pulled back a little bit today in the yellow metal, and they pulled back a little bit in silver and gold. So a lot of the stocks are under pressure today. But it's a strange, surreal environment where we were talking about even at $2,300 gold or $2,200 gold, you would think there would be more companies bringing on supply. The narrative in economics is that when prices get high enough where projects are economic, more supply comes online to meet the demand. And while we have seen some big mine builds this year in Canada with Cote and with Magino and with Greenstone, those have been in the works for a couple of years apiece. And there really aren't a ton of other mines sticking their hand up in the air and saying, hey, we're next. Well, when you get up to $2,400 gold plus, and like now we're at $2,460 as we record this today, you would think all the development projects that are sitting on the clearance rack that are getting valued at $10 or $20 an ounce in the ground would be getting re-rated higher. You would think majors and mid-tiers would be buying more companies to develop these projects. You would think there'd be projects that have been in development for years that say, okay, it's time to finally hit the ground running and we should be profitable. We heard that they were profitable at $1,800 and $1,900. Surely they're profitable at $2,400, almost $2,500 gold. And yet we're not seeing a ton of new supply hit the market anywhere. What do you make of this dynamic where we've got record high prices and yet development projects are not moving to become new mines?
Yeah, I think there's probably a bunch of factors playing in. Still, it might be, lingering pains from 2011. Nobody wants to do anything too hasty. And if we just look at the junior sentiment, for example, nobody actually believes the price of gold is where it's at. It has looked like the gold juniors have been expecting a new bear market ever since it hit 2000 for the second or third time or something. So it's just absolutely crazy. And I also think it might be that's like we're finally really showing the effects of the increased permitting hurdles in the West, especially. I mean, I like this saying that you can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the effects of ignoring reality. So it's like, with the EV boom or whatever, it's like everybody's talking about how much metals we're going to need and yada, yada, yada. And the mining sector is saying, well, that's kind of impossible and we can't even permit anything. I think partly we're seeing that in the gold space. And we talked about this off mic. It's like, I don't see many mine builds announced. I don't see much at all happening. It's like the whole sector is kind of lethargic, if that's the right word. It's like, or apathy, I should say. There's like, we're just a deer in the headlights. Like, yes, the projects that are getting built now, they started, years back and they took years to get the permits probably and all that. But it's like, I'm not seeing much action and it's just absolutely wild. Of course, every mine in operation today is eating up its reserves. So it's like, well, if we're going to have a gold market and given the price of gold right now, it looks like there's quite the demand for it. But it's like we're not seeing much in terms of supply reaction.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because sometimes on the show we talk to oil and gas companies, and if oil went up from $80 to $100 suddenly or $120, you would see companies just turn on wells, and it's really easy because it's a liquid to just pump more oil. But with hard rock mining, it is not an easy process. As you say, the permitting is holding back a lot of development projects. We talk to projects, and sometimes they tell us, hey, we may get the permit by 2027, 2028. It's like, okay, well, it's 2024. What's going to happen in the next 3 years at these higher metal prices if there's nothing you can do? So I think your point was great, Erik, that having a permit now is more important than it's ever been. And I think that blocks a lot of M&A deals from happening because the majors don't want to buy a project if they don't know if it's viable yet or if there's not a permit in place. I guess to that point, looking at what the majors are doing or what the big companies are doing, we do have a couple news releases this week where there are some majors partnering with the juniors. One of the companies I know that you follow is First Nordic Mining, and that's FNM on the TSXV. And they announced that Agnico Eagle had partnered with them, I think, at a 13% stake. And then they also just acquired 100% of their greenstone belt in Finland, in addition to doing a lot of work in Sweden. So what do you make of Agnico Eagle taking a bigger stake in the Scandinavian assets?
I think this is incredibly interesting. First of all, Agnico, last I checked, it was yesterday, they had reached a market cap of $52 billion, making them the second largest gold company in the world. So you know their threshold for what moves the needle for them is, huge. $1 billion project, for example, means really nothing to them. That's nothing they will care about. And I've listened to a few interviews with their CEO, and he keeps saying that we're a regional miner. We're not a global miner. He points that out all the time. So it's like, okay, that's kind of interesting. So it's like, not only do you have the highest thresholds, like you're the second most picky gold major just from size, you're also the best performing one, but you also label yourselves as regional players. Like you don't just want to have a project, whatever. It's like you want areas where you can be for a long time and have organic growth in that production hub, let's say. So what's happened for First Nordic? Well, we have the Borssele deposit already, obviously, and Agnico has a stake, 55% of that. And I don't think that's large enough for the current version of Agnico at 52 billion. Even if it went to 4 or 5 million, which I think it's going to go to, that might still be too low. And also, that would be kind of a new region, so to speak. That would go against what they see themselves as. Then First Nordic comes in and consolidating the entire thing. Now you have 100-kilometer strike. Now you have a district or a regional play. And First Nordic, before this news, they put out soil sampling results and bot till results from their 100% owned project, which Agnico did not have any exposure to. And they have, 3 multi-kilometer soil anomalies at Påbacken, including a drill discovery at the Ida target. And they have the Storjuktan project, which they delineated a 5-kilometer long soil anomaly. So it's like, these are very large targets, and there are many of them, and the land position is huge. So it's like, then you see Agnico Eagle do this deal. And what's interesting is, like, it's obvious that the gold line in Borssele is the flagship project of First Nordic. They have, after they exercise all the warrants here, they should have like 4 or 5 million in cash or something. So the placement was done for 8 million. That's what Agnico paid for their shares. And if First Nordic really loved Oijärvi so much, there's like, yes, we're going to spend time at that, even though it's kind of obvious that they like Oijärvi. I like Oijärvi. That's probably a better flagship gold project than 90% of juniors have, because it's Agnico Eagle drilled and it's an entire belt, whatever. But it's like, First Nordic could probably have paid for that in cash without dilution, let's say, or needing to dilute right now, maybe. But at the same time, if First Nordic decided we're not going to focus on Oijärvi because the gold line looks so good, so they would have dropped it in that case. Why not? They have cash, they have more targets than they can even drill alone in Sweden. But yet this deal happened. So to me, it looks like one of those situations where Agnico wants exposure. They kind of see, hey, this could actually be district scale, regional scale potential here in Sweden. And we want exposure to it because we already own 55% of the largest undeveloped gold deposit in Sweden. And they're like, okay, well, take Oijärvi. That's how we get in. And it's like, then you get, Oijärvi gets off our books, let's say. So to me, this looks like a compromise, because directly speaking, yes, it's a payment and they get their position via Oijärvi, but it doesn't really make sense, except for, to me, it looks like, yes, this is kind of a friendly, I scratch your back, you scratch my back, and they get then more exposure to Borssele and, of course, a foothold into First Nordic.
Well, and I'm wondering, Agnico's got a pretty big footprint in Finland already, because they've got their talons into the Rupert project. They're obviously very interested in Firefox because they took a stake there too. So it's not just the Sweden assets for First Nordic, it's also the Finnish assets.
Yes, absolutely. So it's like, I don't know how they're going to monetize this, because they're going to have so much stuff to do in Sweden at the gold line. Thankfully, drilling in Sweden is ridiculously cheap, or at least compared to most Western jurisdictions. So we can do a lot of drilling. And I look at it as a huge vote of confidence. Again, this is the highest quality gold major you can find. And to me, it looks obvious that they want exposure to the whole pie. Whereas like, okay, they're obviously selling Oijärvi. So it's, by definition, one could say it's like they're not getting in because of Oijärvi, because they're just selling Oijärvi to First Nordic. So they get exposure in First Nordic. But to your point, yes, they are focused on regions, and they did a placement in Firefox. So it looks kind of that, went back the time a few years, it looks like and I heard people say they were getting out of Finland. But now they're kind of, at least in the Lapland Gold Belt, they're kind of getting in a bit. And then you see this move in Sweden. So I think they're planning ahead. I think they like the best jurisdictions. I mean, Agnico are famous. I mean, most of their stuff is in Canada. So they stick to the highest quality jurisdiction. It looks pretty obvious that they want to be a regional player. They want huge land packages. They want to be able to mine wherever they are going to put up a mine for decades to come. And in that case, you need to see more than 5 million ounces.
Well, and I think that it's just an interesting story of where the majors are moving, but maybe not on the jurisdiction that everybody was thinking, Canada or the U.S. They're moving into Scandinavia, Sweden, and Finland. So it's just interesting to watch where the majors are moving. We do have one, though, that is moving in Canada, and that is Brixton Metals, traded on the TSXV under the ticker BBB. They just put out some news that their Atlin Gold Project, they've actually optioned that off to Eldorado Gold. And Eldorado Gold is definitely a larger senior producer. And the Atlin Goldfield Project has been something where Brixton really hasn't had the bandwidth to work on it because they're so busy at their Thorn project. What did you make of the news that they're optioning Atlin off to Eldorado?
I mean, I think this is great in the sense that you know that this sector right now, the sentiment in the junior sector is so bad that your flagship project is going to get discounted heavily. I mean, in Brixton's case, we know BHP is involved. We know on their other project, Hog Heaven, they have Ivanhoe Electric involved. And I would say it's like Hog Heaven is probably not priced in at all. And their Camp Creek target, for example, with the backing of BHP and their huge land position, I mean, it's selling for peanuts, I would say, in terms of the potential, because, again, BHP is, what, $130 billion company or something. So, I mean, this is a way to at least get something going, to monetize something that they're not getting a single cent appreciation for by the market. And I also think it points to let's say the larger gold companies are doing. It's like huge land position in the Western Hemisphere, or I should say in North America. So it's like, this is the stuff I'd like to see. I mean, empire building, basically. If everything is selling for peanuts, because I think it's a pretty okay deal, especially from a cash position and all that. But still, it's like, it's not the most expensive deal, but it's very, very early stage. But it's like, this is the stuff I kind of like right now. It's like, when everything is on sale, even at a gold price of 2,460, whatever, it's like, buy up all the future pipeline you can. You can pick up enormous land positions for almost nothing. And yes, right now we have very hard time with permitting and all of that. But it's like, in the long run, permitting could get easier. In the long run, these real estate plays could be worth a lot. But as it goes for Brixton, I like the fact that they're being proactive. It's like, okay, we're not getting any credit for it. Might as well have a major work on it. And that's going to generate some value, hopefully, yada, yada. And it's not going to, take up too much of their time.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see what the majors are doing, where they're positioning, what the rationale may be. And it's good for the juniors to bring in these stakeholders. Like, it's good for First Nordic and it's good for Brixton to have these partners, because it brings in capital. It also brings in expertise. It brings in a brain trust of people that can share ideas. And it kind of signals that the majors don't really want to do a lot of the exploration work. They want the juniors to partner with them. Now, in the case of Eldorado, they look like they're going to move forward on that on their own. But in the case of Agnico Eagle, it does seem like they're going to put it in the hands of the juniors to do the exploration work while they're busy building mines and developing mines. So we'll keep following along with those stories as they develop. We can at least say that there is a junior that put out some good news this week that's doing it on their own, and that is Goliath Resources, traded on the TSXV under the ticker GOT. And actually, I talked to Roger yesterday about this, but they have put out the first hole of the 2024 drill season. They're drilling 15,000 meters, but the very first hole went down through some known entities, the Sherbet, the Bonanza Shear, and then it hit this new kind of mineralization that they're calling the deep Mothership Feeder Zone. And it's because it had a different kind of mineralization than even the Golden Gate Zone below it. So it looks like a tentacle of mineralization that's come up possibly from further down in the depths of the guts of the system. And there's some bismuth in there, and there's a big chunk of molybdenum, and they think that signals that it could be the feeder system. So right out of the gates, in their very first drill hole, they've made a new discovery of a new kind of mineralization that could be a feeder source. What do you make of this news for Goliath when it's just really getting started for the year?
Yeah, of course, net positive. It's like hands down. On the first hole, and you hit stuff that looks like that, and it's like you might have already tagged it, because yes, theoretically there's a source down there, but like you don't know if that's ever going to get found, for example, or if you find something of the source, it's like, does it even look good? Is it for some reason, barren source that all the fluids, all the mineralized fluids have already left or whatever? So it's like to hit this on the first hole and discover a new zone, and it's like, okay, obviously it expands the blue sky potential and the probable potential, because now you have a new zone that's probably not just going to be one drill hole thick, if you know what I mean. And for starters, I think Goliath has one of the most interesting exploration stories in the precious metal space, especially in Canada already. I think the zones that they already have, I think they're going to grow. I think they're going to have a multi-million ounce gold and silver and some base metal system before everything is said and done. This just adds on top of that. So I think the probable potential they have is underappreciated. And this just opens up a new, basically, I'm not going to say probable potential yet, but it's like, yes, this looks like it could be a discovery. And who knows, maybe it's obviously possible that it's even a bigger thing than what they've already hit. But to me, that is still free optionality, because I don't think you're paying for the source to be this incredible mothership deposit that's going to, make Sherbet pale or anything like that. So it's like, from a risk reward perspective, it's like, okay, this story just got a lot better because that's even more free optionality. And I think maybe really large optionality. And what's even more interesting, I think, is like this sector is so full of short-term traders and momentum traders, gap traders, and what have you. It's like it opened up, I think, plus like 6-8% or something. I bought some more at 8% because, to me, again, I think it got better than the market share price went up. And then, I don't know, an hour later or something, it was down to maybe plus minus 0 or plus 1%. It's like I could not believe it. So I just bought more. Then the next day it's up 15%. And today I guess it's, I don't know, plus minus 0, whatever. My point is that right now in this sector, you can see some of the most blatantly positive news still get overshadowed by the short-term nature of, and again, if you have a gap, maybe the gap traders come in, whatever, and the retail folks, they're not really in here. So there's nothing that really forces the market to be very efficient in the short term. So it's like, from a longer term perspective, you have no idea what kind of opportunity some of these short-term traders or gap traders can provide, because sometimes, as we've seen, blatantly positive news, and that goes for First Nordic as well, is not really met with that much of a push higher in price, even though it's obvious that it should go higher because it is net positive. So it's like, for a value investor, again, it's almost like being an insider. You can see the news and you don't even have to pay up for the obviously good news.
Yeah, it's just a strange environment where a company puts out amazing news and then barely anything happens, or it goes up and then sells back off in the same day. It doesn't speak or reek of investors thinking long term about how these things are developing into more valuable projects. It doesn't speak to the alpha being created by these companies or by doing these partnerships, as some of the other companies we covered. It's just really strange environment where we're at record high gold prices, and yet it seems like everything is still very muted and asleep. Like you say, it's almost apathetic in the sector. And it's just a great environment to be a value investor, because you can continue to pick up deals as they get squeezed back down by the short-term traders for the long-term value accretion. I think a lot of people have become impatient and just don't want to wait any longer. But sometimes the best rewards come from getting positioned and just doing nothing and waiting for the thesis to play through. We'll definitely keep following along with all the news in the sector and how these junior mining stocks are behaving. But I appreciate you coming on the show, Erik, and sharing how you're looking at things. And if people want to follow along with Erik's work, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you over to thehedgelesshorseman.com. You can see some of the articles and the video that Erik puts out on a regular basis, as well as track some of the news and the companies he's following. And looking forward to our next conversation, Erik.
Thanks, Chad. And consider me biased as always. I own shares of all companies I mentioned, I think, and Brixton is a banner sponsor.